Welcome to the IOE Peer-to-Peer Dialogue series, where we explore critical issues in the world of work impacting employers and businesses globally. My name is Tina Morney. I'm from the International Organization of Employers, and I'll be your host for this particular peer-to-peer dialogue. Join us as we hold thought-provoking conversations with business leaders, policy experts, and change makers from around the globe on issues shaping the world of work today. We are very privileged to have Ms. Bettina Schaller, the head of Group Public Affairs at the Adecco Group and President of the World Employment Confederation, WEC. She serves in various influential roles, including Vice Chair of the Business OECD Employment, Labor, and Social Affairs Committee, the Co-Chair of the G20 B20 Future of Work and Education Task Force. She's also a steering group member of the World Economic Forum and the Global Apprenticeship Network. It's not over yet. She's also an advisory board member of Asia Society Switzerland. She is also the co-founder of the Swiss arm of The Boardroom, an initiative aimed at bridging the gender gap on corporate boards. Bettina, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So the first question that we have is to do with women entrepreneurs. What barriers, particularly in access to finance, do women entrepreneurs face, and how we can ensure that they don't miss out on economic and business opportunities? So for the audience, let's just set out the context. Women entrepreneurs play a crucial role in driving economic growth and advancing social development. However, we all know that they face significant barriers, particularly in accessing finance. We hear that a lot in international policy debates. Women are often overrepresented among the smallest businesses in low-margin markets, and they face inequality in the home, contributing to increased economic dependence. So to close the gender gap, there are efforts to make efforts where necessary, including education, in the care economy, economic inclusion and empowerment via women's participation in the labor market. And according to the GEM data from the UN, women are 43% more likely than men to exit businesses for family reasons, highlighting the heavier burden of family care responsibility. This is just an example of many of the challenges that they face. And despite this, 43% of global business owners face challenges in starting, maintaining, and growing their business, particularly in volatile economic contexts. So the questions that we have for you, if you are ready, is that what are the most significant barriers to access finance that women entrepreneurs, for example, face, and how can these be addressed? Bettina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And let me first of all, of course, thank you so much for hosting me today, and particularly to have the conversation with you, Tina, as a key eminent representative of the International Organization of Employers. And congratulations for putting the spotlight on this topic. I think what we will discuss a lot today is the fact that a lot is being done, but the impact is not quite there yet, right? And that's why the first question that you ask is such an important one, because it goes straight to the heart, which is what are the barriers around the financing as well. At the end of the day, if you cannot access the financing, you're not going to make it. And maybe on that one, let me just, because I've listened to the stats and the data you gave attentively, and of course one always have to differentiate. So let me maybe here share what I see out there, which is there's actually differences depending on the industry that those young female entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs and older entrepreneurs female are in as well, of course, as well. And so there's certain industries where the access to funding actually is there, and where the frameworks are there, and where there has a lot of progress is showing, and a lot of activities already have unfolded, and again, access to funding is there. The issue is still that on the supply side, even though the framework allows for access, it doesn't actually happen in real life. What does it mean? Very often, those instruments, those financial instruments that are put at the disposal of women entrepreneurs are actually not suited to what the project of the woman entrepreneur is. And so it's a little bit this issue we have, you know, the world of finance, you know, a lot of men in it, they build products and instruments that are made for basically men investors and men entrepreneurs. And then when women entrepreneurs present their projects, there just doesn't seem to be a fit. So again, the instruments might be there, but there's no fit per se. And so that dysfunction we see is still quite considerable. The bias is also still there, so that's also something to say. Women just have a bigger hurdle very often in explaining what it is they need the finance for, what stands behind, and what the entire ROI will be on the initiatives that they have. And that is actually another challenge that we see, which is more, I guess, on the demand side, right? So we have the women entrepreneurs. They are out there. They now know where to access the finance, but they're not financially literate. They actually don't know how to speak the right language when they have to speak to investors, to lenders, to banks, so that they can really sell their project, their initiative, their business plan, and therefore it creates that asymmetry again between, well, the demand, the supply, and the access.
Thanks, Bettina, for sharing that. So that just leads me to another question. So do you think it has a lot to do with the stereotypes that society sees the role of women in society in terms of that? Or do you think, you mentioned digital literacy, do you think it's more about the lack of skills in that particular domain? Or what other factors would you say would determine whether or not they have a higher chance of accessing finance or not?
Well, look, it's a bit of everything, unfortunately, right? And again, once you start digging, depending on some sectors, if you see that there's a history already of investing and having created networks, and that is a key piece, by the way, and where women have, from a younger age as well, been exposed to entrepreneurship and to accessing finance, there that hurdle is less there, right? Mm-hmm. I think the bias hurdle, unfortunately, that's probably the one that is the most prevalent still today across countries, across cultures. There's almost sometimes I feel a bit of a patronizing approach, you know, of men who will then say, well, and, you know, and there's the quota element and the percentages, we will dedicate a certain amount of or percentage of finance or projects to women. I don't think that is the way to go, right? So we need to continue, and that's why conversations like these are so important, you know, and for an employer organization, a global one like you, to put the finger on it and to just call out that bias element, which is just still there and which needs to be addressed consciously. So we're far away from having solved that one.
Thanks, Bettina. And we're hearing a lot of conversations at the international level about changing mindsets. You know, it's so difficult. I mean, there's only so much companies can do to help that. We also need the governments to be with us. It's a shared responsibility in changing this mindset, right? To increase more women entrepreneurs, to have more women participate in the labor market, to have more women in, you know, C-suites, in decision-making positions. So what would you say, from your experience, what kind of policies would you say have worked in terms of changing that mindset? I mean, other than investing in the TVET system, which is already really challenging because you only see the outcome, I mean, the results at the later stage. Yeah.
Well, it's that mix again, right? You need gender-focused policies there, and ideally starting at the younger age. That brings in actually education policies as well, where you just address, and ideally in schools, you know, which countries these days are actually addressing the role that women play in the economy. On the other hand as well, it's a broader issue. Which countries have policies that actually per se focus on financial literacy and would therefore then as well include? So there's some structural policy level instruments that are not there, and that therefore we're perpetuating a system that hasn't been working basically since the Second World War. Certain things have more success and are showing better results, and that is those policies, for instance, that allow for microfinancing. We see that as a very powerful instrument that is being used by quite a number of governments, notably in the global south, where there's just a different approach also to funding per se, and where I think with a culture also of probably broader, development aid is the wrong word, but just financial support instruments. We've been able to see over the years how, thanks to microfinancing initiatives, more women have had access to funding. As you know, a Nobel Prize winner was also awarded in that space, and that also then created the awareness for this type of instrument. But overall, you're right to point the finger to the regulatory frameworks, of course. But I think that just as much attention needs to happen, first of all, in the financial industry per se, right? So where the money is, if we keep talking about the financing, and then, of course, as well, in the business community, where we should ourselves be leading in that mindset shift that you're talking about. I mean, Tina, we're in the year 2024. How is it possible, in so many countries, and we're talking about highly industrialized economies and societies, but still the percentages of women in business and then women entrepreneurs is just shockingly low. And these are people that you and I interact with on a daily level. It's their areas of influence as well. How come we're not able to just recognize the power of entrepreneurship that 50% of the global world population have? So I'm quite staggered still, and I think, again, the business community in its own interest has a key role to play here.
Thanks, Bettina, on that. And it's really tricky because a lot of policymakers, they see this as a woman's issue, but it's not a woman's issue, it's a societal issue, right? And then you mentioned, Bettina, about, education policies, right? So, from what we're seeing, there are some governments that are still, I would say, reluctant, or they have a conservative approach in terms of education reform. A lot of ministries of education or the schools themselves, they're very cautious in changing the curriculum to meet labor market needs. So obviously, we've been saying a lot as the employers that the TVET system is not aligned with the labor market needs or industry needs. So how can we encourage governments to work together with business to change this mindset together, to reform the education and training policies, to make sure that these women, have, digital literacy, they have entrepreneurship skills, they have the ability to access microfinance? What can governments do to work together with us in this regard?
Yeah, I think, again, there's a few countries where this is working quite well, and where you would think that the overall framework is given. And maybe let me speak here to one country that I know very well, which is Switzerland, where also talking about the regulatory framework connecting the world of education and the world of work is one of the best developed in the world and the most sophisticated, and that shows, of course, in the very low numbers of notably youth unemployment. It's also a society and a government that encourages entrepreneurship per se, and it's, of course, also an environment where the financial instruments exist, right? Now, I'm citing this example on purpose because still, and even in Switzerland, the numbers of women entrepreneurs are too low. And so back to your question, Tina, what should we do and what can we do? it brings us to that mindset piece again, and it brings us to inherent cultural biases in Switzerland as well. Maybe not all of your listeners will know, but it's actually a very traditional society, which is something a lot of people hear with surprise when I talk about it. It's a country that is very innovative, but also lives in certain very traditional structures. And to me, that is one element that then leads to that continuation of a situation again where, well, women entrepreneurs are more seen as the, definitely exception and somehow the exotic, participants in the economy, right? I mean, I'd like to maybe here think of France, which to me is one of the countries where, in general, women are being supported thanks to the government frameworks that exist. There's a lot of support in terms of family structures, for instance. There's a lot of support to entrepreneurship as well. I think there the numbers are showing. And again, the society is incredibly open to women working and those who wish to be mothers also having a family context. So it's that ecosystem that needs to be created. I couldn't think of instruments that we are lacking these days, and that we should be calling for. And I think that's one of the reasons why also, at least for me, there's not enough progress, and it might be a contradiction. It's because the fight has been fought in a way, in terms of the feminism. I mean, if I may say, our mothers, were out there. They were in the trenches. So you would think that all the elements are here, but still we're not getting it done, and that's why we need to look at this issue from a different angle. And my answer to that is just to keep elevating the voice, pointing the finger, and then obviously bringing great examples that have worked, but attainable examples. I think if we always talk about, the big companies that make it, sometimes it seems unachievable also to a woman entrepreneur, right? You need to showcase those examples where it's the small steps that then led to the success stories.
Thanks, Bettina. And as you mentioned, large companies, there's always a perception for, many countries that all companies are all made up of multinationals, but 90%, even in Switzerland, I believe more than 90% are micro, small, medium enterprises.
Absolutely.
So they really are the backbone of many economies, both developed and developing. So definitely any legislation or policy frameworks that can help provide this enabling business environment for business to grow and thrive and innovate can be really, really helpful.
Absolutely.
So that's really, really, really helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe there to add, and I'm now just thinking of one sector, I think, which has seen more women entrepreneurs because it has allowed for job sharing, for instance. And so back to your question on policy, I mean, I should have mentioned, but sometimes the obvious things one doesn't think of, which is just the flexibility as well to then set up your business. So now we're shifting away from the financials, but just in terms of how you set up your business. So that industry is the healthcare industry. There's more and more doctors and doctor cabinets that are opening, that are run by women and almost women consortia that realize that this is a perfect way for them to combine, obviously, their professional interests to be business owners. So they own their medical outlets as it is, right? And then obviously also to tick the box on all these many other things that are not only typical to women that you want in life, but back to the traditional structures that we talked about that very often are with women, so family care in general, etc. But I think in that health industry, there's probably, and I would have to actually look at the numbers, but just by intuition, I would say there's a higher amount of women entrepreneurs who build consortia of women doctors.
Thanks, Bettina. In fact, we just concluded, just for the audience, information. We just concluded the outcome of the ILC, the International Labour Conference Committee on the Care Economy. So there is some recognition there on the role of women entrepreneurs, women empowerment and inclusion,
Well, there you
and
go.
the role of the private sector in the care economy, especially in countries where there's a changing demographics, right?
Yeah.
When you have an aging population, for example, you do need to invest in the care economy, and this is where women entrepreneurs can really contribute in practical terms. So, okay, Bettina, so we were deviating a little bit from the questions, but I thought it was really important to get into those questions. But
I thought they were spot on, your questions.
Thanks, Bettina. So now let's go to women accessing board and C-suites.
Yes.
So obviously,
one of my favorite topics.
Exactly. You I would say you broke the glass ceiling, and you've had to go through a lot of challenges, I imagine, to get to this point, to get to this position. So from your experience, Bettina, what are the specific strategies or initiatives that can help women access board and C-suite position, either from your experience or from what you're hearing as best practices by different countries?
Yeah, and I'm probably going to confirm what a lot of your listeners will know, because they're likely exactly that cohort also of women and men, who are in positions themselves to join boards. But I'm still going to just reinforce that message. And maybe first of all, I got engaged in this initiative in Switzerland, the boardroom, because I was actually tired of hearing the same old fact, apparently, which I don't believe, which is there's no list of women, right? I mean, I keep hearing all these men, accidentally or obviously, who tell me, well, we'd love to have women on our boards, but we don't know where they are. They don't exist. There's no list, right? And so I said, no, this is just absolutely,
not true.
That's not true. And in any case, if it was, which it isn't, but let's build the list. And this is what the Boardroom Initiative notably is about. And let me use this as the first angle to come to your question, what I think will allow for women to break through, it's to be put on the list. In other words, find yourself, maybe in a very basic way, for instance, the right private employment services partner, so the right recruitment company or executive search company, where you state the intention that you have to find a position on boards. And here again, Tina, I mean, we all know it, but I'll state it again. There's boards and boards. And probably a lot of people think of the multinational companies, and those boards, which these days are, on average composed by 7 to 10 members. And of course, more and more countries, there's actually quota on the amount of women that should be there. So everybody thinks about wanting to be one of those 2 to maybe 5, if you're lucky, right, women, because then you're at a 50% on the boards of those multinational companies. Well, it's very unlikely, if I may say so, just statistically, that as a woman you're going to make that. And that's got nothing to do here with, discrimination or anything, but it's just got to do with supply, actually, in mathematics. But where I'm focusing at is the boards of companies, again, in that SME segment, in the segment also of family-owned businesses that are looking obviously to diversify and that are looking to bring women on as well. And there is that bigger number. And there again, very often, it's recruitment companies and executive search companies that will have the access. But not only. It is absolutely clear that your network, and the right network, is one of the key conduits to board positions. Statistics vary there. I mean, I've seen statistics which say that still today, up to 90% of board placements came through the network. So if I started by saying go to a recruitment company, some people tell me, well, if only 10% of the open board positions are with the recruiters, that's not going to help me, right? So my message here is don't only do the recruitment avenue, clearly focus on that network piece as well. Now, again, that's easier said than done, right? I mean, for many women, well, either they are, let's say, stuck in their industry, stuck with their employer, but the likelihood that their profile is actually super interesting for somebody well outside of that industry is just so much higher. Because let's not forget what we're looking for these days, and that will be my third point, but I anticipated, which is the skill set that you bring. Very often these days you need the diverse boards in terms of gender, of course, but in terms of the skill set. And so if you are in the let's say, well, medical industry, for instance, I would say these days there's a big chance that you might be interesting for a board because of the know-how you have in that healthcare industry. Let's think of COVID. Many companies had no idea how to deal with it. The Adecco Group that I work for took on doctors and medical experts just to understand the impact of COVID, also then obviously on Adecco Group employees, but in a broader sense on business. So to bring it back, that network element is key. If you don't have it because you're also stuck, you know, you're in your daily routine, you're with your employer, you're in your industry, well then I encourage you, do the effort and join networks. Join either organizations and communities that are dedicated to women on boards. I think that's almost the easier one. But my advice is just join broader organizations and broader networks. Ideally, join organizations on issues and topics that matter to you, because then you're passionate, you are moving in your purpose, and you will be with people who will see that as well, and they will recognize the skills you have, and therefore you will be seen as a candidate again for those board positions, right? So 1, the recruiters, 2, the network, and then 3, I alluded to the skills piece, which I think, or I'm now going to say I know, we're just at the beginning of actually deconstructing for the purpose of our curriculum, really. This relates to this skills-based revolution that we're asking for in the labor market, right? So to shift away from just titles and well, I guess certificates that you earn at a university, where you then a lawyer, right? But what we're asking for these days is to dig behind, and then if we take the lawyer, well, you're a specialist in let's say, well, commercial or trade law, and then automatically, if you bring those skills to the front in everything, then it makes you as a person, on top of your gender, interesting to a board, because you bring a certain skill set and know-how to that board. And I know you've got more questions, but so I'll finish with this. This is where we see more and more that boards are looking for skill sets that traditionally a lot of women hold, because they will be in professions, again, this is the data tells us that are very often picked by women. Those are, for instance, human resources. Those are the sustainability space. Those are topics, again, related to more social sciences. And we know that boards are looking more and more for these elements also to be featured, as it becomes more and more complex for companies to understand their ecosystem. So that skill element is something that we're working on at the boardroom as well, by the way, to bring that to life so that you can show your interest in the board search process based on, again, your merit, which at the end of the day everybody talks about, right? Independently, where you're from or what gender you're from, it's what you bring to the table that counts. And I think that will also bring more women to board positions.
Thanks, Bettina. That leads me to two questions. You're right, I had a lot of questions. So the first question is to do with the networking part, because, you know, we're hearing a lot about, you know, I heard someone say, well, your net worth is equivalent to the worth of your network. So the richer your network is, the more valuable you are seen within your peers, right? So what do you think about this notion of coaching, mentoring, or sponsorship? Because that's just as important as your network. You can have a network, but then again, you need someone to lobby for you or someone to push for your name to be in the board. So you need to have, you know, this support system that would actually promote your name. Like, oh, Bettina would be perfect for this particular position, right? And then the second question is to do with the skills component that you have, and that's, I would say, the last question that I will have for you. What is the Adecco Group or the World Employment Confederation doing in terms of, I would say, looking at the kind of human social skills that women would need to be eligible to be considered on the board? Because, as you say, it's one thing to have certificates where you get diploma degree from university, but you need more than that. It gets you through the door, but it doesn't help you move up the ladder, right? So you need that human social skills like cognitive skills, communication skills, persuasive skills. These are the kind of skills that you need to be, I mean, one of the many that you need to be, you know, considered relevant to be considered as a board member. So that's the two questions for you to reflect and answer.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. Well, let me pick up the network question. And you're absolutely right that mentoring has proven to be an absolute game changer for all the women, and actually men as well, of course. We're talking about women here, who have benefited from mentoring programs. I have not come across any mentee at this stage that has not benefited from being enrolled and being coached and being supported, because such a program implies the intention of the mentor to support and to put at the disposal of the mentee everything he or she has in order to advance the mentee. So that mindset element that we talked about at the beginning is inherent to the mentor who, and maybe I speak here for myself, so I don't want to generalize on that one, but it gives me so much pleasure and satisfaction to see the mentees develop and succeed and really tap into dreams that were exactly that, dreams, right? But then that become a reality. And I am truly, personally, it's almost actually, you know, there's almost an endorphin rush. So it's almost, and I have the pleasure of being involved in the mentorship program of the International Organization of Employers, which is now in its second year. And I think, Tina, I almost forced you to take me on because, again, it's for my personal pleasure that I do that. I also learn every time. I can tell you, we hear that reverse mentorship element, right? So I can subscribe to that. I learn as well, but it really just, it fulfills me with purpose if I can be of support. And that's why these programs are fundamental. And we cannot have enough of those programs, also of men obviously supporting women. This we started with women entrepreneurs. Those who will make it are the ones that make it because they've had the support. And by the way, also men entrepreneurs. You will, and actually in general in life, let's be honest, you will not be able to be successful in life if you don't have the right support, if you don't have an ecosystem that is there and that, well, will, you know, give you the right hint when there's a business opportunity, or obviously just support you when there's an issue, etc. Men just somehow, right, and that's why we're talking, have that on a more structural level. So coming back to the mentorship, absolutely crucial. And I would say one of the instruments that should be also supported financially as good as possible. I want to make a comment though to the network element, and you said, and it was so important that there's this correlation between how many people you know and then your success, and just also call the attention today to the social networks. Because we probably have thinking and understanding that our success is linked to, well, the physical, obviously, relationships we have and the network we have, meeting people, and it is important to go to events and to mingle and to present yourself at every opportunity you have, really. I mean, and you need to accept those dinner invitations and join friends and go to dinners where you don't know anybody. By the way, I hear a lot of young people who tell me, no, they're scared of going somewhere where they don't know anybody. And I'm like, no, that's the best opportunity, because that gets you out of that circle that I alluded to earlier, right? And opens it up, right? All right, so that's the physical network. But the social networks these days are not to be underestimated, and I think should be used, and I'm using the word used on purpose, for the benefit of creating that network as well. LinkedIn, of course, is one of the key platforms there, but there's others, and so as a woman, as anybody these days, I would advise to have a good strategy as well on how to use those social networks for the benefit of your professional and then also your board position, if that's something you're after. So that was on the networks, but then you asked me about the skills piece.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, these days, the social skills, the human skills, and believe it or not, so the latest survey that the Adecco Group carried out on the skills topic per se is also carving out that leadership skills are very sought after these days. We are in times of transformation. We're in times of a big unrest, and people and teams need an environment with leaders that guide them through. And I think that opens up a completely other next conversation between you and me, which is about women in leadership and how women can acquire those leadership skills. Because again, employers, businesses, organizations demand from people that they hire, in particular, that they have these leadership skills. And if we want to see more women and more women on boards as well, they need to bring that with them. And so the World Employment Confederation is one of the key industries that focuses on training opportunities, on development, but actually also importantly on the assessment piece initially, right? Just to be able to break down again that whole skills landscape and to be able to give it a term and then put it into, I think, a category, I guess. I don't like this word, but I'll use it so that you can then make the steps and apply and position yourself. The Adecco Group is one of the key players in the market of assessment, of career support, of career transitioning. And let me finish off. It's also the company that has the biggest online coaching platform in the world called Ezra Coaching, an absolutely fantastic product, I can say, but really support, which closes the loop back to the mentoring piece. This is the coaching piece, and really any instrument and tool we have to work on that mindset towards bringing women into board position, into entrepreneurship, and into the labor market overall.
Wow. So thank you so much, Bettina. And
Already?
I have to end our podcast, but I'm really grateful. And you are one of our, esteemed mentors in the second year. And we were really surprised on how you managed to find time, considering all the positions that you have. You have always a busy schedule, but you always find time because we understand you're passionate about promoting gender equality and making sure that you pay it forward. So
Absolutely.
I'm a big
Absolutely.
believer in
And
that.
lift along the way. Absolutely.
Live along the way and always continue to learn, like leadership skills, all these kind of skills is important. It's really good to hear about Ezra because then you have a baseline and then you can always upskill and reskill yourself because we should always be lifelong learners. I'm really a strong believer in that. So thank you very much for your time and for sharing your experiences and your expertise on this topic. Really grateful to have you in our circle, in our network. And we hope that, one at a time we can help more women, enter the labor market, more women to go into C-suites, more women to make more in decision-making positions. So thank you so much for, taking the time to speak with us.
Of course, Tina, thank you for having me and delighted to be on this mission with you. And thank you, Tina, personally, and the IOE in general for the great effort and engagement. We need you guys here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Definitely need you to as well. So thank you very much for taking the time.